Bassem,
Piers.
it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Last time, obviously, we did it remotely.
Yes.
You were here. I was in London, and you complained that it was an unfair situation. You couldn't see me. Your earpiece kept falling out.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, fair enough. I hear you. I got on a plane. I flew 6,500 miles. And not only that, we're doing it in somewhere that is very familiar to you. It's the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, where you performed many times as a stand-up. So I've done my bit.
You did. But actually, this is not the first time we meet in person.
No, we did originally
We did.
in London last year.
And I know that many people are watching this for the first time.
That's
I don't know
awesome.
this, but like, I would really love to tell the story of that moment because I was having a tour in the UK and Europe, and I was doing my English stand-up. And one of my, advertising promotion plan was to come.
We'll speed it up a bit here.
So my agent called me, it's like, Bassem, you're gonna be on Piers Morgan. I said, damn. It's like, what's wrong? It's like, well, Piers Morgan blocked me on Twitter.
I did.
And he said, like, what did you do? I said, well, during January 6th, the insurrection, you tweeted something about it. And I was so angry at what's happening. And I remember you and Donald Trump in a picture. And I said the guy who had Donald Trump with him, whatever. And then I used like very harsh words. And so
Wow.
and then I said, like, does he know? I don't know. Does he know? I don't know. Does he know? I don't know. So I walked into the studio. And the moment I was like being seated and they're preparing before we go on air, and he's like, oh, hi, Bassem. It seems that you have more followers than me, but it seems that I blocked you. Why?
Damn.
And I told you. And then we said the story on air. And it was funny because I made the joke. I was like, you have always been standing against cancel culture. Yeah. And you just canceled me on Twitter. But we agreed that this is not canceling because this is your own space and you're free. But now you're unblocked me and we're here.
And we're here. And it was, and actually we agreed about January the 6th, by the way, just for the record. I was done about you. Maybe you weren't surprised. I was completely staggered by the response globally to our interview several weeks ago. Were you taken aback by the scale of it?
Yes, of course. But I understand why. For many years, the media covering the Middle East has been showing a certain point of view. I'm not going to say biased, but I would say it did not allow certain voices, certain...
It's a little biased. The Western media is definitely a little biased.
The frustration. Whenever you speak to people in the Middle East, they tell you the same thing. They're not very happy with the coverage of the Middle East because our voices are not heard. Now, I am the least qualified person ever to talk about this conflict. And yet, just because
I'll slow down a bit
I
here.
made some of the talking points that we say and we hear the whole time, people felt heard. And when people have this feeling, they're happy. They have this response. They say, like, oh my God, for the first time, the West are actually hearing our point of view. Some of the point of view might not go well with other people, but at least we have a conversation. And I think that is the reason.
That's
why
true. Yeah, a lot of people felt heard.
That way. Yeah.
It's such an incendiary subject matter. I've never seen social media so ablaze with hostility on both sides. Did you actually, as well as enormous praise from the Arab world, did you also get criticized by some parts of the Arab world for not going perhaps hard enough?
Oh, you didn't do that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
The thing is, this is like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Right.
If you don't speak up, why don't you speak up? If you speak up, you didn't speak up enough. If you're done, why are you if you speak up too much, oh, you're taking all the attention on you. And I love that fact because people always who accuse people of being the center of attention, they are actually not very happy that the attention is not on them. This is actually like a rule on social media. But yeah, there was a backlash, but there was also a backlash from the other side, which I mean, here and other comedy clubs, I worked with people from all kinds of different backgrounds, Jewish, Christians.
Yo, he has a
Arab,
fucking lit ass like hoodie. I don't know what he's wearing here, but that shit looks awesome. I want it. That looks fucking lit. It's fucking like that style. I fuck with it.
You're a terrorist sympathizer now, And I think it is important to have a nuanced, deep, interesting, intelligent conversation. A lot of people waiting for this are kind of like, yeah, Bassem, bury Piers, show him. And this is the problem with the news today. The problem is the news today, it's not about the news anymore. It's about the people giving you the news. So it becomes a show.
That's true, yeah.
Two gladiators in the Colosseum.
And to a certain extent, yeah.
And this is why people don't get anything out of it. It's a circus.
You know,
It's
one
a
of
circus
the things
show.
I heard a lot was, who is this guy? and they weren't talking about me.
Sometimes I wonder.
Now, obviously, you're very, very well known in the Arab world. You're known as the kind of, they called you the Arab Jon Stewart, and you're well known in America, but you weren't that well known, for example, in the UK. And I think what this interview did, it made a lot of people think, wow, all right, this is incredible, but tell me more about Bassem Youssef. And I did a bit of research into your life, and it is a fascinating
Who is
journey
Bassem?
you've gone
I like
to
him.
get here to Los Angeles. And I think it's worth just taking a little beat here to talk about this, because you began in Cairo as a heart surgeon. I mean, that was your career path.
Yes.
And you were a heart surgeon.
I was.
All right, let's speed it up a bit again.
I spent 19 years in that career, 7 years in medical school, 12 years as a practicing doctor, and 2011 happened, and the revolution happened, and I had my own show on
The Arab Spring.
videos.
Well, I'm going to come to this because by coincidence, I had just joined CNN to replace the great Larry King. And I hadn't actually done any live show. I'd done a few weeks since I joined of taped interviews with big names, Donald Trump, Oprah Winfrey, things like that. And I was flying back to Los Angeles when I got a message that Egypt was going up and the start of the Arab Spring. And I actually went to a studio very near here, about a mile down the road on Sunset, the CNN studio, the old Larry King studio. And I went live for the first time, and it was about the Arab Spring, and it was about what was happening in Egypt. And at the same time, you, in Egypt, were actually in Tahrir Square, helping wounded protesters, actually medically treating them.
Yeah, I mean, this was a kind of movement that inspired a lot of Egyptians. At the time, I was in the hospital, and a lot of people just had volunteered, and the nurses were just like giving us like supplies, go, and we were going there, and we were basically tending to the wounded, because it is, and it kind of gives you a different perspective when you see helpless, defenseless people who are not armed, who are being beaten by security forces, military forces, being shot, being hurt. And all we can do is just like provide some medical attention. And it kind of gives you a perspective to see how humanity sometimes can show its most ugly face.
And the suppression of free speech, freedom of expression. The ability of people to say what they honestly feel about a situation. And the suppression of people's basic rights to freedom.
Absolutely, yeah. And that kind of like taught me a lot and inspired me to do the show. But
Well, you start, it's a crazy story, this, and I want to tell it because you just decided to do 5-minute stuff on YouTube. And you were expecting a few people to watch it. And then literally it just flies, and suddenly you're getting millions of people watching this. And very quickly, one of the big networks comes in. And then you're suddenly doing this stuff for 30 to 40 million people. Like a third of the entire population of Egypt is tuning in to watch it. You're the biggest star of Egyptian television.
Oh, please.
You were.
Don't stop.
I mean, what an extraordinary thing, though, for a heart surgeon to go from helping protesters medically in Tahrir Square, the start of the Arab Spring, to within a year, you're the biggest star on Egyptian television. It's a crazy thing.
It doesn't sound as glamorous as this. It felt horrible.
Did it? Why?
Oh, yeah. Overnight fame, this
Scary.
size, it's toxic. Terrible. It corrupts. It goes into your soul, and it's not good. It's not, I actually didn't enjoy it. And the worst part about it is that like you're trying to do comedy in very controversial climate about very controversial issues. So you'll never satisfy people. And the problem is that people have these expectations. Oh, if you are successful in this, you must be successful at solving this. And when things are not solved, because politics, as you know, very difficult to solve, that expectation, this love turns into hate. And this is one of many reasons that I had to leave and I came here eventually.
Well, let's just take people through what happened, because they probably don't know, a lot of people. So during the presidency of Mohammed Morsi, who was a democratically elected Islamist, you had relative freedom to start, but then the more you went after government propaganda, the more you stood up for the people against the government, then the trouble started. Morsi wanted to shut you up. You eventually get dragged through the courts.
I was arrested. I was arrested for one day. It was a warrant for my arrest, and then I turned myself in, and I was interrogated, and it was the funniest interrogation ever. And in my stand-up shows, I talk about that scene.
Because the guards were reading the stuff out and laughing, right?
Well, the guards were taking selfies with me, which is funny. Right. and the exchange between me and
getting selfies with the guards, dude,
was extremely funny. I mean, I don't like to victimize myself. I don't like, oh, look at it. I actually like to find humor.
But why were you arrested? What was the criteria?
Oh yeah, I think the list was insulting Islam, insulting the president, spreading false rumors, and disrupting the fabric of society. And,
wow.
It was. I think the people in the room didn't know what to do with me because they ended up discussing my jokes. So it turned into a writer's room. And I was kind of like, how do you think we make this funnier? And it was the funniest exchange ever. And after 6 hours, I was let go. And
was it scary, though, at the same time, that suddenly the machinery was getting a grip of you? Because it was to get a lot scarier. But was it in that moment when you first got arrested, you thought, I'm being arrested for breaching my freedom of speech, right?
For some reason, I just like went with the flow. I went to the interrogation wearing the big hat. I went to the show. It was just, I just wanted this to be a farce because I just like, you're really coming after the comedian. And I just tried to enjoy myself, but deep inside I was dying.
Well, you actually, it gets serious enough where you may have died, because actually Morsi gets, of course, deposed. In comes General El-Sisi in a coup, a military coup, and he doesn't find satire a laughing matter, particularly when the jokes are about him. You get blocked. They literally block your show from airing.
I aired one episode, and it's interesting. This is a very interesting story because the first episode that was aired after the removal of the Muslim Brotherhood,
One episode,
everybody
huh?
was waiting to see what I would say. Because by that time, all of the Islamic channels that were, I mean, like me and Islamic channel, like it's like they had 5 channels and they were like me and them going like that. They had like 5 channels that have only 1 hour a week. And then they were removed. And then a lot of the other dissident voices were also being shut down. Now, people are waiting. What will Bassem say? And on the day that the show aired, the next day I went out and everybody's like, good, at least somebody is speaking. It was a very controversial episode. Nobody liked it. And yet everybody liked it. Because people said like, you're supporting the coup. No, you're the Muslim Brotherhood. Everybody accused me of something. All I did in that episode was just being a mirror of what is happening in the street and showing them how ridiculous it is.
You didn't take a fixed position.
Well, my position, depending on what's your position?
What did you intend your position to?
My position was to show the ridiculousness of how the people now was like, oh, we got rid of Islamic fascism, but we are heading towards another fascism. There was a song that I did that was very controversial. People, it's very funny. The pro-Muslim Brotherhood thought that this is a disrespect to the people who died, and on the other side, the people said that this is a disrespect to the army. And when you manage to offend everybody, you know you're right.
Yeah.
And then the people in the middle is like, oh, you weren't tough enough. And I was told, it's like, why did you go after it? The ceiling of freedom just went down, and I was just like, it is very difficult to go against an authority that was very popular at the time.
And especially a military authority with
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of experience
Oh, yeah.
of weaponizing these situations.
Yeah.
You had death threats.
People would always choose, most of the time, they would always choose the military form rather than the religious form because they kind of like, at least they are not infringing on my personal freedom. Not yet. But
you had threats on your life, didn't you?
oh, all the time. I don't talk about that because like I have been having death threats like never stopped since 2011. Never stopped.
Have they continued since our last interview?
Oh yeah.
They never stopped.
People threatening to kill you.
All the time.
Why? For what reason?
Oh, for just saying something that they don't like. Oh, because you are against Egypt, you're against Islam, you're against our president, you're against God.
That's how it works for everything.
It never stops.
It doesn't bother you?
I mean, if you die, you die. You know, if you die, you die. I mean, since when? Whatever. Like, no bodyguards deflected a bullet. You know, maybe the guy who was with Ronald Reagan. But
Yeah.
I think it's like whatever. Even like at a certain point, I actually had like private security, and then I told them I can't. I cannot live like that. If that's my destiny, if I die, I'll just die.
No.
You end up with your lawyer saying you got to get out of here. You got to get out of Egypt. It's
Yeah.
getting too dangerous.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen. You're going to get arrested again and probably thrown in jail, or you're going to try and kill you. And you
Él dijo que si me matan, me matan. Que yo no tengo seguridad. Que tú no puedes vivir vida teniendo miedo. Porque gente quiere matarlo porque él no soporta Egypt, porque él no soporta Palestino, porque ellos creen que no soporta Hamas.
flee
Toda la
to
gente lo quiere
Dubai,
matar.
and then you end up here in America.
Yes.
Everybody wants
Was
to
that
kill his
always
ass.
the plan, to eventually come to America, or was it expediency because of what happened?
Well, it's funny that you said that because I visited the United States after the first year of my show. And a doctor that's there, Egyptian doctor, has been there for a while. I said, listen, Bassem, you are very visible in the media, and I think you can use that to apply for a green card as a special talent. And I did. And I said, like, I have like a huge show in
It's
Egypt.
actually the criteria, because I have the same.
Yeah.
Is an alien of exceptional ability.
Yes.
Is what they call you.
Yes, we're very
Charmingly.
Yes, we're very
We're
exceptional.
exceptionally able aliens.
We are, but we're still aliens.
Yeah, yeah. I know. It always makes me laugh. Like, you can come here, but you are an
You're
alien.
an alien, but you're exceptional.
Yeah.
And I just applied for it, and I got it. I got the Time 100 that helped bolster my my application. I said, maybe I'm not going to use it. And then when that happens, ooh, the green card came handy. So a lot of people think that I'm here on asylum. I'm not. it was just a strike of luck.
You now do stand-up. You've done it for 5 years. And fascinatingly, you do some of it for an Arab audience.
You have a whole show in Arabic and
an English-speaking version.
Yes.
And they're probably very different, right?
Totally
because
different.
Different sensibilities, different humor, different crowds, different expectation.
Yes. Well, the Arab audience come to my show, they expect that's going to be another version of my show that I did in Egypt. And I said, no, it's my personal story. And that when the Arabs come to my English shows, like they think it's like an English version of the shows. Like, no, it's a different story. Even then, this weekend, right before I met you, because of our interview, I sold out Arizona.
Really?
Yes. And I stood, and the first thing I said, like, who here came because of the Piers Morgan show? I was like, I was like, boy, you're gonna be disappointed because this is not about that.
But isn't that amazing? I mean, that shows the power of that interview.
Yeah.
Resonating even in Arizona here. Amazing.
Yeah, because I don't want to succeed just because of a trending moment of time. It is the same show that I've been working and perfecting, and like any stand-up comedian in the United States, your dream is what? Is to sell your special to platforms like Netflix or HBO, and you want to get there. Because for me, that was like a rebirth. Because I thought like everything was lost. I came here, I had nothing. The first 3-4 years, it was terrible. The first 2 years I was doing stand-up. Oh, I bombed hard. And I went home crying. I said, like, I'm not going to make it. And then suddenly I have already a tour. I mean, even before our show, I already had a set tour. And now I'm having like this ability of like talking to people with different languages, talking to all these different languages. The show that I did in Arizona had an incredible mix of Arabs and Americans.
Amazing.
And they came here and they completely, and there a lot of them came, they were Palestinians. And they came with like the Palestinian flags and the keffiyeh, and they thought, it's like, guys, it's like the way laughter, being good at your job is in its way a way of resistance. Because when you laugh, when you show people that, hey, they have Arab people here, and they are, by the Arabs and Palestinians population in Arizona, one of the most established population in the United States. Arabs in the United States in general, they are like professionals, doctors, engineers, professors, even the Uber drivers. They are probably were like an engineer or someone very established there, but he had to have like a step down in order to come here and survive. So, I mean, we hardly come find like illegal aliens here from, or people like came in that were not qualified. So, and this is the problem of, this is why the reason people were very happy of our interview, because because part of the hate on both sides is that we see the news from a different perspective, and people here see the news from another perspective, and everybody's like, why are those people reacting like this? Because they don't see what the other person sees. And I hope in that interview that we can bridge that gap.
Yes.
Before we, can I
Yes.
show? Okay, so this is a gift from me and my wife. This is olive oil from the West Bank.
Ah,
Whenever I go to Jordan a lot, but my wife also like, ask for the oil from the West Bank.
it's very good.
It is the best oil ever. And the thing is, the olive trees, they survive up to 600 years. And they are passed from one generation to the other. And it is like a family heritage. And the way that you do it, so this is
That's
za'atar.
sweet.
Za'atar is
Sorry,
basically
guys. I'm debating somebody
thyme,
on my
and you add
Facebook
with sesame
right now
and a
about
bunch
Palestine,
of
Israel.
herbs. And the way that you eat that, you take like a piece of bread. We don't have to do it now. Maybe at the end of the interview.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
And
sweet.
you basically, you soak it a little bit in the oil,
Yeah.
and then you take the za'atar. And I'll demonstrate here. Chuk, chuk, chuk. And then
Aw. Dude, I gotta try that
I love
shit.
Arabic food. So
That looks
you
good.
know the interview.
You're leaving with this oil. So
I
it's
will
yours.
take that.
It
and-
shows that,
Well,
yeah.
thank you. And it's very kind of your
No.
wife. Thank you.
No.
Thank you very much for me.
Well, I'm the one who bought it, but it's okay.
Obviously, you started the last interview with, I mean, I would argue savagely dark humor involving your wife. How you've been trying to kill her, and she was using your kids as human shields and stuff. And I'll be honest
And I'm
with
still
you.
trying to. But you know
All
what?
right.
When I failed, you know what I
Let's
did?
continue. Sorry.
I went out to the house and I just like randomly slapped other neighbors.
So,
You know,
it's interesting.
by mistake.
Now, this time I'm ready for you, okay? This time I'm ready for the humor.
Oh, you're ready? Okay.
No, but it's interesting because last time I was very taken aback. And I remember thinking as you were doing this right off the top, I remember feeling very uncomfortable, unusually uncomfortable. and
Yeah,
thinking,
'cause he got him with
people
them
know how to
jokes.
react to that. I didn't know whether I was supposed to laugh or be silent, and I sort of ended up sort of slightly grimacing.
Got him with them
half
jokes.
and listening. And then I realized it was very powerful what you were doing. It was satirical, but it was savagely satirical and extremely effective. And that's why I think the interview did so well. But I'm not going to pretend that I found it easy to listen to it or to react to it, because I didn't.
You know why? Because all I did was just take the talking points that's been in the media, not just for after October 7th, all through the conflict. It's always like, we need to kill it. All right. You need to kill 5? No, kill 10. You need to kill some? No, kill all. This is what satire does. It take reality, flip it on its head, exaggerate it, and then you can see how sometimes very uncomfortable.
That's very smart.
Stupid that sounds, because I was just reacting to whatever the media is telling me. It's like, oh yeah, okay, let's do it. There's no pushback. So suddenly, the person who's proposing the most extreme measures is like, oh, we're taking, oh no, that's too much. So that was like a very simple technique. I just took the talking point and just exaggerated.
It was devastatingly effective, I thought. First, before we go any further, how is your wife's family? Because she is half Palestinian.
Yeah.
Are they okay?
They're good. They're good. They are safe for now.
Yeah.
And as like the last week, there was no internet, as you have.
Yes.
You know, I saw you tweet at the IDF. It's like, how can they know?
You know how many views that tweet's had? Nearly 40 million.
Yeah.
Me just saying, how are they going to see this message if you've cut the internet off?
Yeah. I'm wondering if the IDF's like, why aren't the Palestinians liking my tweet? Because they don't see it.
Right. No, but I thought that was a perfectly correct assessment of it.
Yeah.
But the reaction to that tweet I did was enormous, as everything is in this thing. And I had a lot of people say, finally, Piers, you get it, right? Finally, you get it. And I wanted to say, listen, I'm trying to reach a place where I get this, but it's an incredibly complicated issue for someone who is not Arabic or Jewish to poke their head into. And I've had to cover it as a journalist for a long time.
Guys, this shit is not complicated, all right? I'm going to show you a video. Michael Brooks. Look at this shit. So, Piers Morgan says it's complicated. I'm trying to get to a place where I can figure this shit out. It's complicated.
To say, listen, I'm trying to reach a place where
I'm
I get this, but it's an incredibly complicated issue for someone.
So it's complicated, right? Here's Michael Brooks breaking it down because it's so complicated. It's so complicated.
Hi.
Hi.
So my first question, it says on your Twitter.
Man, Michael Brooks is so sexy.
Am I getting this right?
No.
Is it the right Twitter?
On my Twitter bio, it says I'm Jewish.
No, but like in your tweets.
He's sexy. What a sexy boy. I miss
I
him.
have Jewish background. I'm just trying to think of.
Okay, so as someone with a Jewish background,
Yes.
how do you feel about Bernie's plan for Israel, especially as someone concerned with foreign policy?
I love it. It's an absolutely necessary. My Jewish values teach me to oppose apartheid.
Okay. Could you elaborate, please?
I mean, there really isn't that much to elaborate on. I mean, has anybody ever been not only to Israel but also to the? Have you been to? Have you been to the West Bank? Have you been to Gaza? Yep. You went to Gaza.
Wow.
Okay. But not to Gaza. You can't be in Gaza. Well, I know people who've gone to Gaza. You could definitely go to Gaza. So for me, my politics are built on a base of, economic justice and actually really like anti-racism, in some ways as distinct from some of this sort of woke stuff in a way. But when I was already, I grew up, I was pretty connected to left politics, so I always knew growing up about the travesty.
I gotta lower this fucking light in front of me. It's too bright. Or move it to the
And I
side,
knew
maybe.
that people I admired, like Nelson Mandela, said, South Africa is going to not be properly free until the Palestinians are free. In 2006, I believe, I read a piece by a guy named Tony Judt in the New York Review of Books, who was a really important Jewish scholar. And he just said, like, the argument was that, like, literally this is childish. Like, the idea that you have an ethno-state or a religious state, if you're committed to any type of broad-based social, economic equity and civil society, it doesn't work. No matter how justified, right? Of course there's justification because of Jewish history for Israel. There's justification for Kurdistan because of Kurdish reality. There's justification for
Armenia.
Pakistan.
Armenia.
It's notable that Israel and Pakistan are both disasters. Israel not in the sense of, look, if you're a European Jewish background, you have a nice life there. If you're not, you are, even inside 67 borders, not a fully equal citizen. And the situation in the West Bank is, it is literally Jim Crow-like, and Gaza is, it's just an atrocity. So that's not something that anybody could reasonably ask me to support. And I understand, there's some actions from some Palestinian groups that, we can condemn. In fact, those have not even really been in any way seriously in play since like 2003. And when we talk about, look, and the apartheid word specifically is both used by people who were crucial in ending apartheid in South Africa, like Desmond Tutu or Ronnie Kasrils, who served as intelligence minister under Mbeki, who I've interviewed. And the other main people
Wow,
who used the
Desmond
apartheid
Tutu, I
word
didn't know
are
that.
Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak. So it is what it is. And I don't support second-class citizenship and
Facts.
occupation and sieges for anybody, no matter who they are.
Are you not
Facts.
concerned about the
Facts.
binary between either condemning Israel entirely, being like also a stance that a lot of like very strong and notorious anti-Semitic people agree with, versus like, seeing this as more of a complex issue where it is wrong what's going on, and that there's also
It's
a way
not
to do this,
complex.
that Israel still exists and is supported,
So
or is
it's not a complex issue. That's the big thing. It's super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship, period. And just as like a thought experiment, IDW people, if we know that if somehow a population of Jewish refugees ended up in West Bank and Gaza, and an Arabic government in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv had an open-air prison in Jewish Gaza, which they bombed with white phosphorus, they killed civilians indiscriminately, and they had no provisions for medicine. They had an embargo that blocked food, that the electricity wasn't running, that there was an over 48% unemployment rate, life expectancy and malnutrition statistics were horrifying. One of the major policymakers in this hypothetical Arabic Palestinian state said, we need to put those Jews on a diet. In the West Bank, there was another Jewish area where there was a little bit more autonomy, but there was regular Arabic settlements where they pulled up the Jewish farmers' foods, they terrorized them with rocks, the security forces broke children's bones, and they couldn't drive on their own roads. We'd all have no problem understanding what that was. So there's nothing complex about it. The second part of your question, it's a pure asymmetry relationship. And the question is rights or not. So that's it. It's not complicated. The second part of your question, at this point,
Literally.
there's always going to be crackpots who are anti-Semitic who condemn Israel. That's not what drives the movement, particularly in the United States. If you work around most people who are concerned with this issue, it's actually populated with a lot of Jewish people. The real question we have to ask is, why is it that AIPAC is hosting a information minister for Slobodan
Yeah,
Milosevic?
get up. What are you doing,
Why
AIPAC?
is it that there's relationships
What are you doing, huh?
between the Israeli government and far-right parties in Europe?
Bunch
Why
of
is it that
bitch-ass
Benjamin
culeros.
Netanyahu's son
Fucking
is
AIPAC.
hosting
Bunch of
borderline
bitch-ass
alt-right
culeros.
Why is it that Israel is an alt-right state, even though it is from the descendants of the borderline alt-right memes? why is it that Israel is an alt-right state, even though it is from the descendants of the victims of one of the greatest crimes in history? That's a serious question, and that's inseparable
For
from the
real.
project, which goes back to the first part that we have to solve.
For real.
Shalom.
For real. Why the fuck is Israel
And I am serious about it coming from Jewish values.
an alt-right
Just
state?
My reading, to the extent I do, which I
If
actually do have some connection
It's
to that
supposed
in
to
a
be for
religious sense,
descendants of fucking
it's
Jewish people
unacceptable
that
for me. But
suffered from a
Yeah, no,
right-wing
I-
government.
we'll but it's not complicated.
Literally, dude. Literally. Let's continue. It's not complicated, guys.
Someone who is not Arabic or Jewish to poke their head into. And I've had to cover it as a journalist for a long, long time.
Not
I said to you
complicated.
before that I was editor of a Daily Mirror in England when we opposed the Iraq War, for example. So, you know, I have taken stands on this thing. On this one, I find, and I'm going to be completely straight with you. I discussed this with Jordan Peterson this week, and he did a pretty incendiary tweet in which he said, "Give 'em hell, Netanyahu, enough is enough." And he was actually very self-reflective about that in the interview we did this week, where he later issued a 20-minute video because he said,
Yeah, because he lost all his fans. He lost all his Middle Eastern fans.
Much better to take time to explain it. Here's where I've got to with this conflict now. I viewed what happened on October the 7th as an absolutely appalling atrocity, a terror attack of unimaginable horror. And I absolutely think that Israel has a right to defend itself from the people who committed it, Hamas. And I've questioned for the last 3-4 weeks, what is a proportionate response? And I have said repeatedly, I don't know the answer. I want people who have a view to have a view about that. And I'll ask you again about where you think we are with this. I also acknowledge that Hamas live amongst civilian population in Gaza. And therefore, if you do what the Israelis are currently doing, which is a ground offensive into Gaza, a lot of civilians are going to get killed. And at what point does that become disproportionate or even illegal?
Ooh.
And I don't know the answers to those questions. And I have a moral quandary because my instinct is to say Israel has to respond to what happened in a very forceful manner. I understand why they want to eliminate Hamas altogether. I understand that if they feel they can, then perhaps we can move to a two-state solution or peace or whatever.
Oh, by the way, guys, by the way. Here, look. I have a file here. I did a live stream 2 days ago. And this live stream was to gather all the information about Israel's crimes. So look at this document right here. Look at this document, please, and study it. Study this document. Write that shit down. Screen capture this document. Let me take out the reaction screen. There's like way too much information on here. So here's a bunch of people you can watch or try to reach out to or whatever. All right, so right here, these are some laws. Look at these laws right here that are very bad. They're not good. No, the Nakba law. Here's another law. Absentees property law. Stealing of land. Requirement of permits. Look at all this. Let's see. No. They do inhumane torture, of course. America owns them. Of course they will do that. Law. To amend corporation, blah, 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 blah. Basically, it's like some weird shit where they pass a law that would give every neighborhood like a weird council of racist motherfuckers that would choose who can live in that neighborhood. That's what that law is. You know what I mean? So, like, study this shit, guys. Study this shit. I'll keep bringing it up periodically.
Who will ever be the person to do that? But the moral question for me is...
Yeah, they literally have a law
And when you see thousands of children
that allows
in Gaza,
Israeli settlers to just move the fuck in.
and then people say, well, do you condemn it? And I find it very easy to condemn Israel turning off the water, Israel turning off the power. I think it's ridiculous that Israel should have that power over millions of people who are not part of their country. I think it's terrible what's happening in the West Bank with the settlers. I think that the stuff there is completely easy to condemn. But can I, hand on heart, condemn Israel trying to destroy Hamas after what they did on October the 7th? That is where I'm struggling to find myself saying I condemn it, because I believe that they are right to try and destroy Hamas.
Yeah, but
Now, what
not
do
the
you
way
feel
they're
about
doing
my
it, Piers Morgan. They're like
moral
literally
quandary?
flattening Gaza
There
into
is-
dust.
There's a lot of points, very lot, and I think this will kind of like lay the ground rules for that interview. There is a whole thing about like Israel right to defend itself, the condemnation. First of all, let's start with condemnation.
Yes,
You want my opinion?
yes,
Condemning Hamas or condemning Israel?
yes.
Completely useless. Completely useless.
Why?
I condemn Hamas, you condemn Israel, interviews over. What happened?
Nothing.
It is just checkpoint, like morality checkpoints.
But I've interviewed a lot of pro-Palestinians, for example, some of whom will immediately say, I unreservedly condemn the terror attacks of October the 7th, and then go on to criticize Israel. And I think that's it's a position I can completely respect.
Yeah.
But I find it much harder to respect a pro-Palestinian guest on my show if they simply resolutely refuse to say
He's talking
that
about
they
low
can
key.
condemn the terror attacks. I
Yes.
find that less
Yeah.
worthy of respect.
But you
He's
see,
talking about
this is the problem
low-key,
with the news. We
the
go
rapper.
into the circular motion of the same answer. One thing that I have noticed, not just on the coverage of these events, the events before and before and before, every time this starts, people say, we don't know what's happening. It's a very complicated situation.
Right.
What is happening now?
It's not complicated.
As a viewer, if a conflict that's been there for 75 years and the media with all this technology has been covering it and we hear the same exact words, we don't know what's happening. It's complicated. It's a very complex. That is a failure of the media apparatus. That is the failure to themselves and for the audience, because why every time this happens, it seems like it is happening from point zero. And I think to help understand that, I will get to the October 7th. I will get to the condemnation. I will get to the self-defense.
Guys,
I
also,
think maybe
October 7th, right? Hamas is a terrorist group. They're a militant group. They're not a proper army. They're not fucking, they're not like trained. They don't give a fuck. They don't have rules. They don't give a fuck about rules of war, of course. They don't have proper training. I mean, and also they're angry. They're pent up. They're starving. They're fucking like, they want revenge, of course. And you should take out Hamas for that. Hamas is in Qatar. And in the underground tunnels. And they have ambassadors in Russia and shit. So unless you're able to kill all of them, Hamas is going to be able to grow again. Like the Taliban. Like Afghanistan. Like ISIS. We haven't taken all these groups out. And the way Israel's doing it, it's definitely not going to take the groups out. They're making more. They're growing it by bombing indiscriminately and just killing people's families and shit.
we can do, we have like all the time in the world, and we can discuss. This interview could be a bookmark, landmark for maybe looking at that conflict in a deeper way that nobody had gone there before. We
Yeah.
have the views, we have people waiting.
Yes.
You know, as I said, I'm the least qualified to discuss that, but it's an opportunity to use it.
I'm not massively well qualified myself.
Yeah, both of us.
I'm,
Like,
a,
I mean, look at us.
I'm an Irish Catholic,
I mean,
right?
look at us. Yeah, two privileged people. One white, one white wannabe, discussing the most complex conflict of our history. But I want to start in a totally different area. I want to start with anti-Semitism.
Yes.
I think it's an important issue.
Yes.
I think there is a rise of anti-Semitism in the world, and I think there is. This is very dangerous. And I, as
Very dangerous, yeah.
who has been through events where there were terrorist attacks somewhere, and that reflects on us. I can completely feel that. Since what happened, I had text message from the Jewish friends. Are you okay? Are wife's family okay? And I was texting them. Are you okay? And I think it is very important to agree on the language, because the word anti-Semite has been used and abused, and most of the time not for the good interest of the Jewish people. Because the first 2 days of the coverage, I watched the news, and there was a lot of protest that was led by Jewish Voice for Peace, and they were led by people who opposed the
And they were called
Israeli attack
anti-Semitic.
on the civilians.
They called them
And I remember
anti-Semitic.
quite well, many of the Republican representatives in Congress came out and they were calling these the global intifada, the global jihad. I love it when they say jihad. They sound like a horse. Jihad. It's very funny.
Yeah, they were calling them anti-Semitic and shit. The Jewish Voices for Peace and shit. And you know what's fucked up about this is like a lot of anti-Semitic people love Israel because they want the Jews to go over there. They're like, yeah, Israel, woo! Go. Jews, get out of here. And so like that's literally the Republican Party right now. Literally. And there's also a whole like Christian evangelical side to it where they want Jewish, they want Israel to become a Jewish homeland, the entirety of Israel, because Jesus was born there or whatever. And then whenever that happens, God will come back down to earth and fight the devil and like the rapture, you know, the whole fucking story. Anyways, it's all stupid bullshit.
Or they say like these are, and I quote, Iranian-backed jihadists. And I said, wait a minute, but most of those people are Jewish. Those people who took over the capital, the same people who took over Central Station in New York, which is known as the biggest civil disobedience event in America in the last 2 decades, they were all Jewish. And then I find Nikki Haley saying anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. And then I remember it's like, oh, Jewish people in America are saddled by the fact that they are not citizens of America or citizens of the world, but they are citizens of Israel, and they have to back Israel in whatever they do. And these are not my words; these are the words of Jon Stewart. He went down and he said it is very, very important to divide these two. And what is very, very interesting.
Would you compare that on that specific point to the way that people try and say all Palestinians are responsible and accountable for what Hamas do?
Yes, yeah.
In other words, I think you can be very critical of Israeli government and their policies and Benjamin Netanyahu and the politicians, but that doesn't mean that you have to take that criticism to innocent Israelis who may have exactly the same criticism themselves.
And this is why it is very important to have these kind of discussions, because the saddest thing that I saw is the people that were in so much support of Israel are anti-Semite themselves. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, she said like, oh, I send my aides, and they took pictures of the protesters. Basically, she's surveilling protesters. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is very known for a very famous post in 2018 where she blamed
Jewish space lasers,
the California fires on a Jewish space laser gun, a satellite, and shooting laser beams to and not just her. You have Steve Skoulas. Thank you so much. He is now the Speaker of the House, and he has been invited before.
I don't think he's a Speaker of the House now.
For an organization that was funded by David Duke, the founder of the KKK. You have Kevin McCarthy, who is the former minority speaker, leader of the Republican Party in the House, and he accused Jewish billionaires of rigging the midterm. So how come those people are accusing us of anti-Semites? So here's the thing. So let's go to the equation that Nikki Haley put on Twitter. Anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. No, it is true. People who hate Jews, they're also anti-Zionists. It is true. And you could be someone who hate Zionists, who don't like Zionism, and you
I hate Zionists. I love Jews.
And guess what? You could be a Zionist, like those people, supporting Israel, and at the same time you hate the Jews, because the chant, Jews will not replace us, these echoed in Charlottesville. It did not echo in Gaza. I mean, in Gaza they say worse stuff in between the bombing on their downtime. But, and these are the same people who are seen with Nick Fuentes, with Stephen Bannon. And you know what's most interesting?
Trump had him for dinner at Mar-a-Lago.
And all of those people are buddies with Benjamin Netanyahu.
True.
How does this work? And you know the people who speak against this, like Jon Stewart, like Bernie Sanders, like Naomi Klein, what do they call these people? What do they call them? Self-hating Jews. And you know what else now they call them? They call them capos.
Capos.
You know what's capos? Capos, basically these were the Jewish inmate in Auschwitz that were forced by the Nazis to stand as guards on their own inmates. You see how degrading this is. And this is the way to shut down conversation.
That's fucked up.
Anti-Semite, Islamophobe, you hate America, you hate the military, you hate Egypt, war on Christmas. This is how you shut an environment that does not
War on
allow
Christmas, that's
disagreement.
funny.
It's not an environment made for
Let me
growth. It's
okay.
an environment made for control.
Let me ask you this. Say, take the student protests in
Yes,
America, at universities. I have no problem instinctively with students protesting. It's actually part of the DNA of being a student, right? But I do have a problem with two things. One, the protests that happened almost immediately after October the 7th, within hours, which were clearly, deeply, deliberately inflammatory and hurtful to Jewish people. Secondly, I have a real problem with the students who were beaming direct pro-Hamas slogans onto buildings on campuses in America. You know, I'm all for free speech, and I really am. The whole show is predicated on that. But not to the point where you see Jewish students barricaded into libraries because a mob is descending on them. There is a distinction to me between people who are obviously overtly, I mean, there was a professor at Cornell University who was literally seen in public shouting how exhilarated he felt by the attacks of October the 7th. He still hasn't been fired, that guy. I think that crosses a line. Do you?
Yeah, I do not like this way. I mean, I can understand why, but I don't condone it. I would never, because you have to understand these people, again, I'm not supporting them. I just want to make sure about two things. The reason that I started with anti-Semitism, because I wanted to make sure to clear any confusion that when I speak about Israel, I'm speaking about Israel.
Yes.
True, true.
When I'm speaking about Jewish people, I'm speaking about Jewish people.
Yes.
Yep.
When I speak about
Facts.
Zionists, I'm speaking about Zionists. It was very, because
No, I think it was
yeah,
very powerful that you did that.
Yeah, I have
and
to be
interesting
careful.
that that's the first thing you did, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, but at the same time, when I tell you why does that happen, it doesn't mean that I condone it. There's a difference between explanation
True.
and justification.
Yeah, you don't need to condone it
Those
if you're
people
talking
who
about
are
how it
exhilarated,
happened or why.
the way that they, this is the same reason why people were so happy about the interview. What do they see? They see Israel as a criminal state who is killing their people, and in the same time, they are supported by the international community and the American. They have no guns, they have no superpower backing them. All they have is just feeling of happiness, like, yes, our enemies that we cannot touch them has been hurt. All they can think about, that these are their enemies that have been hurt, right? I'm not condoning this, but again, like when people were celebrating terrorist attacks, you know, against Western targets. Of course, I don't condone that. But why? Because those people has been from a very young age. What have they seen? They're not being heard by the media. The plight and the suffering of their brothers in Israel, in Palestine, in the Arab world, are not being heard. People in Iraq, you know, like when
Afghanistan.
America and Britain invaded Iraq, right?
The
What-
Mujahideen,
what
we
the
funded the
Arabs saw,
Mujahideen and
two
shit.
superpowers are coming in on just
Osama
regular
bin
people.
Laden's
So
family
whenever
built
there was, like, a
had like
bomb or,
oil,
like,
was an
attack
oil,
with American troops,
rich
people
oil
would celebrate.
family.
Yeah,
They
they're
built
our enemies.
shit, and then they got mad at
Emotions
our
are very
invasion, obviously,
inflammatory.
at some point.
And
And
it is not right.
9/11.
But those people had nothing else. All they say is just like shout. All they say is like to rejoice. It is not right. Again, I'm explaining why is this happening, because it's like, yeah, if I cannot get you, I'm just gonna scratch your eyes. I'm gonna scratch your eyes because you've been beating me all the time, and you have the whole international community backing you up, and all I can do is scream. Is it right? No. But it is understandable. Again, it's not the right thing. But no, it's not like understandable. It's like, oh, no. But again, it is an explanation. Now, hate. And again, this is another way why this has been magnified in the media so much. What does the Western audience see? They see people rejoicing for the death of innocent civilians in Israel. This is what have the Arabs seen for years on the Arab world. For example, if you look up Sidrot Cinema, this is in 2014 when Israel was bombing Gaza as usual, And the Israelis in the Sidrot, the kibbutz or the settlement, they went on a hill and they had popcorn and they had drinks
Wow.
and they were like watching the show and they were cheering with every rocket coming down. This is what we see. Western people didn't see that.
Well, somebody found a tweet actually of mine from 2014 in which I said, at what point does what Israel is currently doing to the Palestinian
That's
people
fucked up.
become terrorism? And because I've always said, you know, I've spoken about this a lot over the years, and I've always tried to be extremely fair-minded, albeit nobody really wants you to be fair-minded. They want you to take a side. But that was clear that my thinking back then was that they were absolutely overstepping
Absolutely,
the mark.
absolutely. But again, to the point of rejoicing.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Is
but
it-
like if you, for example, Google the wedding of hate. This is like a Jewish wedding in Israel where they were celebrating the arsons and
No,
the
no, I've
burning
seen- I've
of
seen-
Palestinians.
Look,
But
Bassem, to be clear, I've seen lots of video
no, but like, I'm
clips.
not talking to you, Piers.
No, I know.
I'm
I know.
talking to the Western audience
I
because
understand, but
I
I-
want to see like I want to say like this is what they see. I mean, for example, there is a very famous video for Samuel Abu Za'anin, who is like a young kid that he was shot point blank by an Israeli soldier, and he was not allowed to have any medical attention. And as his dead body was being put into
Wow.
the ambulance, the Jewish settlers were cheering. So for an Arab audience, this is what we see every day. So when they see, oh, we heard them back, we heard their people like they heard back.
It's the
it is
media,
Not right.
it's
But
feeding
this is what
hatred.
hate does. It escalates. It feeds each other. Radicalism feeds it. It is terrible, and it is just like a vicious circle. So I would like to do something that is very interesting tonight. I want, when I invited Jon Stewart to my show, as much of like a reception that if you see on the YouTube, people just like
Yeah, sorry.
we had to cut the 5-minute standing ovation for broadcast. People was on their feet for 5 minutes. They could not believe it. I remember Jon Stewart telling me I could never imagine that a Jewish guy from New Jersey would have that kind of reception in Cairo. And yet, on the internet, people who would, what? You brought a Jew on your show? Why you are with a Jew? Yes, hate is there. Yes. So, and the thing is like why we do not see each other, people in the Middle East, people in the West, that we do not put ourselves in each other's shoes. And I want to do something very interesting today. I want to give, I like telling stories. And I'm going to tell you a very nice story.
Tell
and this
away.
is the story, surprise, surprise, of the suffering and the plight of the Jewish people. And I want to say that because it is very interesting when you see the trauma and the suffering that the people on the other side went through, you might understand why they're coming so. So this is, see this? This is
Wow.
a map of all of the history of the expulsion of the Jews in Europe. They've been
That's-
like, I have never seen a minority being kicked around this much, right? And of
That's
course, this
fucked
comes
up.
back to the, you know, the whole idea about the original sin that you have betrayed Jesus Christ. The blood of Jesus is on your hands. And then comes the 11th century. At that time, Jewish people were not allowed to own land. They were just peasants. Even some of the professions were not even allowed to participate.
That's fucked up.
But they were allowed to do one thing, usury, money lending, because it was prohibited by the Catholic Church to engage into that. So what happens when you work in money? You get richer, right? And those Jews lived in ghettos. Now, ghettos was not just like isolated neighborhoods in cities. Sometimes ghettos were outside the city. This is like how isolated they were. And in those ghettos, they have to pay gold to the mayor or the governor or the prince or the noble. So they would see, you're getting richer. I need more taxes. So they pay tax. What happens when you have a business and they increase your rent? You increase your service, increase the taxes. So what happened? The Christians started to default. And suddenly, the image of the greedy Jew was
No.
created. Shylock, merchant of Venice. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. You know, like never did I see a creature like you know I can't remember that. Never did I saw like a creature that looked like a man so keen and greedy. Confound of a man. You know, English. I messed it up. Anyways, but this was the image, greedy Jew, the greedy Jew. This was created because of their conditions, and it became worse in 1095, when Pope Urban II called for the first crusade to go and save the birth of Jesus from the unbelievers Muslim. And you know, this crusade did not kill a single Muslim. You know how many people they killed? 2,000 Jews.
Oh
Because it's
my
like, wait, the non-Jews are
god.
all over there. Why don't? So they went to it's called the Crusades of the Rhineland. So they went to the Jewish community because, hey, we own the money, so let's kill them better than paying them. And then came the plague. And then all of the things like, oh, they're killing babies, who would do that to a baby, you know? And they accused them of poisoning the well. This was the kind of oppression that the Jewish people went through. Fast forward 19th century, there was like the Eastern Jew in Ukraine and Russia, and there was the Western Jews in Europe. Those people in the Eastern Jews had to immigrate because there were pogroms and they were like, you know, kicked out. And at a certain point, the people in the West, especially in England, it's like, there are too many Jews. We need a solution. The solution for what? For the Jewish problem. So it's like we need to get rid of them. And you know what? Palestine was not even on the A list. Palestine was on the B list. Because England proposed 6,000 square miles in Uganda for the Jews, 1903.
In Uganda.
And the reason why Palestine was not on the list, that it was objected by a lot of rabbis that said, like, it's a promised land, but only when the Messiah comes. But there were other options: Argentina, South Africa, Uganda, Madagascar.
Wow.
And eventually they said, all right, let's do Palestine. So they went to Palestine in 1914. There was 700,000 people living in Palestine, 3% were Jewish. 1917, Balfour Declaration. Arthur Balfour, he called the Jewish people in England that they are alien and hostile race. And the thing is, the only Jewish member of the parliament of
Erev Tov. My name, Captain Eran Morad. My name, Eran Morad. I was in the Mossad for 13 years.
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf.
I mean, I was not in the Mossad for 13 years.